Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of Girl Living with Alia. I'm Alia. So if it's your first time here, I just come on these videos to talk about my life and hopefully share some things that some people might find useful in terms of like career and living, basically. So I was thinking that today we could talk about something that I've experienced, which is moving abroad. For context, I moved to the UK end of 2020, so still around like COVID times. And then I moved to further my studies. I did my master's in Oxford Brookes, and then I moved to London in 2022. And I've been living in London since, and now I'm working in a marketing job here in London as a CRM exec. And for context, I was studying architecture. I've just put down a list of like pros and cons from my experience that I have experienced. And I thought it would be quite nice things to share because when I was working out, like deciding to come to the UK, um, people never really talked about these things. Maybe I wasn't looking hard enough. In my defense, it was during COVID. I had other priorities. But there's a lot of things that I have since learned since I moved to the UK that aren't really highlighted when people talk about, moving from a country like Malaysia and to like a country like the UK, for example, especially London. Obviously, it's been a really great journey. However, I think it's important for people to know like what comes with this whole process of relocating yourself. So let's start with pros. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is new environment, of course. When I say environment, that includes like a bit of everything. I think weather has been one of the main reasons why I've decided to kind of stick around a bit longer here or even, move permanently. If it's a possibility, I would like to settle in this part of the world. But I like the idea of having four seasons. Obviously, if you're in the UK, you're not really going to feel the four seasons. Like, it doesn't snow during winter. It's not like super warm. It can get super warm during summer when there's a heat wave, but you know what I mean. It's not like super cold winter and then super warm summer, and it's not that big of a difference. However, having said that, you still have really easy access to the rest of Europe, which means that you can go abroad pretty easily to experience those different seasons. So I'm from Malaysia, so Malaysia is just warm and lots of rain, monsoon and haze. So it's a nice change, and I've been liking it so far. I know a lot of people speak about like having two summers in a year, for example, like leaving the UK and go to like a warm country to get some winter sun. But I like indulging in the coldness of winter, and then like then you have something to look forward to when summer comes around. And spring is lovely. Like my birthday is in spring, which means that the flowers are out and it's like that crisp air where it's not too cold and you get a bit of sun. Anyway, weather is probably a big pro for me. And yeah, weather in terms of new environment, and that also includes like social as well. Like, it's it's a bit different, right? You're going from um a country where you speak your native language, and then to a country where you speak your second language. And to be fair, like a lot of my friends back home, when I was back home, we still use a lot of English in speaking. Um, but it's just a different world. Um, in Malaysia, so in Malaysia, like I used to learn or I used to speak Mandarin, so Mandarin, Malay, and English. And coming to the UK, I thought it would have the same level of importance, but because I wasn't super fluent, um, it kind of didn't really matter once I came to the UK. So I noticed that a lot of people here that I've met actually speaks more than one language. So a lot of European language, for example, French, Italian, Spanish. So it's a different perspective. It's like, oh, there's so much more out there for you to learn. So that's kind of nice. I like that there's a bit of everything here. this might be a special case because I live in London. So London is very diverse. Diverse in the sense that there's a lot of international people that come here to work and to study and to live. So I like that feeling, that diversity. And yeah, so new environment, then new experiences. So obviously like I said earlier about the weather, so I was able to go, visit a few different Christmas markets in winter during Christmas, so that's really nice. And the different way of people socializing here, like I know people go for drinks and stuff. I don't drink, but then that whole vibe of, if you're Malaysian, you know what I mean when I say like when you go to mama and you lepak. So that's the kind of vibe, but it's just different. So I have a lot of international friends here, and it's interesting to see, like, even though you're coming from different background, you still share the same term of like hanging out and lepak and like just sit and chat and have food. And one of my favorite places to go with my friends is this Middle Eastern place in Edgware Road. And the vibe really gives me mama vibes. And every time we go there, I bring my Malaysian friends there as well. And it's just super nice. But yeah, like I can bring my Malaysian friends, I can bring my Indian friends, I can bring my English friends. Like that's no problem. Like you share the same kind of quality. So new experience, but also with a level of familiarity. And also like London, maybe this is specific to like bigger cities, but London has everything, anything that you want to do. Like I want to learn how to dance. There's a dance class for £10. I want to learn how to do pottery. Just go for pottery classes. I know that you can also get the same thing in KL, but I suppose back home, because I was living with my family, or well, back home you're just kind of stuck with the same habits, I suppose, and you're influenced a lot by like social media. But then you get used to things, and then you just keep doing those things. Like back home, my favorite activity was karaoke. Like we were going for karaoke after work quite regularly, and I don't do that here because it's not a big thing here, and you just change to something else. Like your activities change, which, I mean, makes me miss Malaysia a little bit because I do love karaoke. However, speaking of like being stuck or doing the same thing over and over again because you're used to it, leads to my third point, which is gaining independence. So, ever since I moved to the UK, actually, ever since I moved to London, and I have been living with strangers and or friends, I've picked up like new hobbies like hosting my friends, because you have to learn how to cook. So I started cooking my favorite food, and I've just gained like this skill to cook and host and serve and socialize. Like we didn't do that much of hosting growing up. So I've always liked the idea of it, and I like that now I have my own space to do this. Again, feels like something that you could do back home. Um, but I suppose when I was back home, even when I was living outside or living with my friends, we didn't do it as much. Or even if we did do it, it's it's a different style. Whereas here, I'm not just hosting Malaysian friends. I'm not just cooking the usual Malaysian food. Here, I'm trying out new things to accommodate to different tastes, and trying out new cuisine because my friends are from all over the place. So that's quite nice, like getting that independence, and also gaining independence in like seeing the world and traveling. I didn't know I love traveling this much until I moved to the UK. So I don't think I've ever been on a solo trip when I was back home in Malaysia, other than just before I flew to the UK. I went to Mount Kinabalu, and I went with my cousin, but then I think we left separately, and then I had like a short break in Kota Kinabalu, and that was like my first kind of like solo trip or whatever. And the first time I flew alone, yeah, was that time. But then internationally, or like going to another country, my UK trip was the first time that I did that. And I went on a trip with my friends where I had to meet them because I joined them last minute. But then I took a flight to Amsterdam, and then I realized how easy it was. And then I couldn't stop doing it. I just kept like trying to find cheap budget flights. And that's another thing, like because now I've gotten the independence of traveling by myself. Combine that with the fact that tickets are so, I mean, they're not as cheap as they used to be, so I've heard, but you can find really good deals with like flight tickets and stuff, and you could just go wherever whenever you want, you know. I really really like that. I really really like how accessible traveling has been ever since I moved to the UK, and now living in London, which means that it's even easier to get to the airport. And I think if you live in Manchester, it's the same thing. But that is definitely a big pros for me, which is gaining independence and being able to travel. And my last pros that I've thought about so far, I didn't want to like overfill the topic, but the last one would be gaining friends. So I feel like I've mentioned earlier, like, you know, having international friends and having friends from different places, and then you get to like go to a different country and then their family hosts you, or like your friends host you at their new place, and you get to see their cities or their home from their perspective, which is really, really nice. It's a really different way of experiencing culture and understanding why people are the way they are. And you also find again like a lot of similarities. You know, the whole like family values, like when you see your friends' families, and similar sayings or habits that even if you're living in opposite sides of the world, you end up doing the same thing, which to me is such a sweet thing to think about, and makes me feel like, you know, even though we're so different in terms of like, if I didn't come here, we probably would have never met, but yet we still do the same things. But yeah, like gaining friends from different parts of the world is definitely a big pros for me. Also, it's nice to be in an environment where I don't really have a choice. I mean, I could just, you know, go and hang out with Malaysians or people that I'm familiar with, but it's nice to just like be out of my comfort zone and see the world a little bit better. And now moving to cons. I feel like I'm gonna be a bit of like a bit negative, obviously because it's cons, but you know, take it with a grain of salt. But these are the things that I didn't really think about before coming to the UK. Honestly, like me coming to the UK was really on a whim, especially because of like COVID and stuff like that. But I was at that stage of my life where I needed to get away, and now I love it here. However, we're going to talk about the not so nice things about moving abroad. So my first point would probably be, you know, related to being homesick, not being able to see your family, and like just the general FOMO about leaving your life back home. So I didn't really, like my first 3 years here, I didn't go home just because of the cost of flying home. At that time of my life, I wanted to travel more. I wanted to see more new stuff rather than, you know, spend that money going back. So my family came over for my graduation. Last year I went home. Last year was the first time I went home, and I'm gonna go home again this year for Eid, which is really nice. Yeah, so not seeing your family. That can be really sad. If you have the chance to go home, do that as frequently as you can. I know it's pricey, but like being homesick is a real thing. Like seeing or hearing about, you know, missing out on people getting married, your friends getting married, your friends getting engaged, your friends having their first baby, or your cousins getting married, or in my case, I think what I miss the most would be, I know I'm missing out on my nephews and nieces growing up, and they were quite little when I left, so I was worried they might not even remember me. But it's crazy to see, like, I think quite a few of them are my height now. I'm pretty short, but it's crazy that they can fit in my clothes, or my clothes are not even big enough for them. But that's one of the things that I feel like I'm missing out on the most. And also, like, just life back home, especially over COVID, like, a lot of things have changed. And then I miss the things that I used to have, the convenience I used to have, like having a car. I live in London now, and having a car is just would be absurdly expensive, and there's no parking. And I just miss having that kind of independence where I could just go on a drive. That used to be like one of my favorite activities to do, and I can't wait to be able to do that again here in the UK. But yeah, just missing my old life in some ways. Like I miss my cats. When one of my cats died, there wasn't anything I could do about it, and you kind of get a bit desensitized, desensitized. I think that's the word. When bad things happen, because you moving away is your choice. Like you would have had to already weigh out these options, and missing out on these big things is just part of the journey, and there's nothing much you can do about it. You can't really dwell on it or be sad about it because you chose to leave. I feel like that's probably like not a very positive way of thinking about it, but sometimes that's the only way for me to carry on with life, which is just to not think about it. And that makes me really sad sometimes. And then the second one would be, in my case personally, is having that dilemma between like living your life and sort of kind of like representing your family. I don't know if this is an Asian thing. I don't know if this is just me because I've got strict parents. Well, my parents are quite strict. My family is quite strict and conservative. If they're watching this, I hope they don't hate me. But there's always that feeling of like, oh, when people look at you, they're gonna think about how you're a Muslim and you're not behaving, or there's just that level of, or when people know that I'm Muslim, there's kind of a level of expectation on how I should behave. It comes with a lot of questions, and there's always that stress of like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't want to misrepresent other people. And sometimes it feels like there's a label over my head and I'm expected to behave a certain way. And I didn't really like that. I didn't really like that pressure. And I guess I sort of tried to find a way to blend in as much as I can. At work, for example, I try to let my work speak for itself rather than... this is probably all in my head, to be honest. This is probably just all my insecurities. However, I feel like that is something that I never expected, or I never really thought about before, or I never really prepared myself for before coming here. Like if I were just to be around like people I'm used to or familiar with, I wouldn't really feel this way because you'd have a group of people that's just like you, so there's not really any feeling of people looking in and looking at you. So that's one of the things that I felt like a con. I wouldn't say it's a con, but I feel like if I had prepared for it, maybe I would have dealt with the situations a bit different or a bit better. So the next thing was going to be expensive. I mean, I knew it was going to be expensive. I didn't realize how expensive it was going to be, especially like post-COVID and stuff. But in my situation, because I switched careers, from architecture to marketing, I'm starting over, and that means that it doesn't come with like a big paycheck, especially in London where things are quite expensive. You kind of have to prepare for the fact that you're going to go like paycheck to paycheck for a bit, or you either compromise and not live in such a big city, or move to places like maybe Manchester and stuff like that. But for somebody who wants to start over, London felt like the place with the most opportunities, and that's what I did. But yeah, it comes with a hefty price tag basically, and it's slow. The journey is slow, but then it is going. And I would say it's also a pros because there's so many things that I could try out. I had the opportunity to sort of experiment or explore new things, whereas maybe back home I would have just kept doing what I was doing. So coming to the UK definitely put me into a different perspective and gave me a level of boldness and independence. And the next thing is visas. For me, honestly, when I came to the UK, or at least when I was planning to come to the UK, I didn't even think about if I was gonna stay here long. Like I didn't even know what that meant. That's on me, really. Like I didn't even know what it meant to move abroad. Like it felt like a holiday at that stage. I didn't realize, or I didn't even consider that maybe I might want to stay in the country. Um, and once I did realize that, then it kicked in, like the complications of actually the things that you have to do to stay in the country, like work visa. Well, we were lucky for my cohort because there's graduate visa, which means we had 2 years to think about it. But then you also need to use those years to prep for getting a work visa, and that again is expensive, costs a lot of money, and costs a lot of stress. And if you have 2 years, you probably spend like 1 year just worrying about, are you gonna have enough time to prep for the next, renewing a visa. Yeah, visas, like really look into it. And I know some friends who probably come from a different country. In terms of traveling, they have to spend a lot of money because they need to apply for visas to go to European countries, whereas I don't have to, thankfully. But that costs stress and money and time. So never really thought about it before coming here. I'm grateful that I don't have all those complications as much. I'm currently now sponsored, so alhamdulillah, I don't have to think about it for another 2 years or a year, and then spend another year figuring out until I get my PR. Well, that's another thing. When you're moving to a different country and you're relying on like work visas, especially in my situation where maybe my skill is not, I'm not highly skilled yet because this is a new job, a new career. It's so tough to even find companies that would want to sponsor. Like I know quite a lot of people struggle with that. And I've lost a lot of friends who I made here in the UK who have had to go home because they couldn't get a visa sponsorship, which is really sad. Which leads me to the next point, which is losing friends. Like, yes, you are gaining friends here, and then what happened to me a lot was that I made new friends as well in terms of being reintroduced to the friends that I had, or being reintroduced to like my seniors and my juniors back home in my old university, and then we became friends here because you're sharing the same life, so it's relatable. So you make friends with people who are relatable, and then you guys come together and you're like, oh, I want to stay in the country. Yes, like we're going to stay in the UK. And then you have to watch them leave because it's not an easy market at the moment and it's so difficult to find sponsorship. But yeah, losing friends is hard, and it's not just losing friends here, it's also losing friends back home. Obviously, like I was saying earlier, when I was moving to the UK, I was going through some stuff, and when you go through stuff, sometimes you disappear, and then, or you're not able to, because of the time zone, the time difference, you're not really able to keep up with your friends, and you kind of lose out on each other, and sometimes you just drift apart, or because you're not in person, it's hard to resolve conflict, and you just stop talking, and that's it. So yeah, there's a lot of heartbreaks like that, where you have to say goodbye to friends, or you don't get to say goodbye and you just never speak to them again. And you hope that making new friends means, you've got other people to socialize with. But another thing that they don't talk about is how lonely big cities can be. Like, it's a lonely life moving abroad if you're not settling yet, if you're still in that process of like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna stay in this place, or like when you keep moving because you have to rent another place, or with the rental market in London, maybe they're raising prices, so you have to move somewhere else, and it's really hard to like settle in a place and build community because everybody is moving and you're moving as well. So that one's quite tough because like if back home, if I wanted to just go hang out, I can text my friend and be like, oh, jom lepak, or let's go out, and then we'll go to like a neighborhood mama and we'll just sit and eat some Maggi goreng, and it's easy because then next day you just go to work. Like it's definitely a lot easier when you have friends like that, where they're your people, you know what I mean? Like they're just one call away to come and spend some quality time together. Whereas here, and I guess it also aligns with like adulthood because everybody's so busy. So you have to check in your calendar, or everybody has different holidays and all sort of stuff. So yeah, like on being an adult, and you add another layer of like the difficulty of making friends in London, and you add another layer of like everybody else here, or like people who grew up here, they have uni friends here, or they have school friends here, and they've got their circle, whereas you are trying to make your new circle. And that's what makes it so difficult to meet new people. So yeah, those are my points of like pros and cons. To summarize, the pros is that you get to experience a new environment, you know, you get new experiences, weather, activities, culture, and you gain the independence, and you learn to live with yourself, and you become your own person, really, because you have the freedom to just explore and experiment and try and see what you like and see what you don't like, and just seeing the world. Whereas the cons are like definitely gonna feel like you're missing out on your family and your friends, losing those friends, seeing people having to leave because of visa issues, like visa is a big thing, and feeling like you have to represent something. I feel like if I didn't care that much about what people think of me, this is probably not even going to be an issue. But you know what? Some people might relate to that. That feeling of like, oh, I have to be good all the time and I have to act like this or act like that, rather than just like having that peace of mind to just focus on living as yourself. I'm learning to do that. And expensive. Lots of money. It's very expensive right now, especially in London. But we move, you know. There are reasons why we do the things we do, and I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm very happy, and I'd rather be here than anywhere else. Although, you know, when I get more money, I definitely will go home more frequently rather than just once a year. So yeah, hope that was useful in one way or another. Hope that was entertaining, and I'll speak to you guys soon.